Phil is next up.
Yes.
I'll let him get set. His intro is, I think, funny, but he says he's got just enough technical knowledge to be dangerous, which is a nice, was a slight kind of a free song there. And he's spent the last few years working in digital publishing and social media. He's got an interest in using technology in new and innovative ways. And he began working with, have I got this right, Phil? IOGO. IOGO. I knew I'd get it wrong.
That's fine.
It's fine, okay, he'll do it better than me. And that's about looking at technology to help people with chronic illnesses to improve health using games and social networks. And as he says, having fun, keeping well. So, Phil.
Thank you. And thank you for the invite. I've been asked to speak into this mic, so can people hear me? Yeah, okay. So, IOGO. We do that. We create games that motivate people to change their mind. So there's a lot of psychology going on behind what we do. We specifically target chronic illnesses. And tonight, in the sort of the 15 minutes that I've got, I'll be looking at two areas and trying to weave that in a little bit to innovation, as well as to the personalization agenda that we're here to talk about as well. So we use game psychology, game mechanics, gamification, whatever you want to call it. It's not particularly new, but it's more and more being used in enterprise. It's being used in sales. It's being used in anything that's got a process involved in it. And that process can be, as I say, a human resources process, a sales process. But in our case, we're using it for specific areas in health where two things occur. First of all, where there's a problem. So, for example, the one I'll give you later on is where children with type 1 diabetes, the last thing they're interested in, the very last thing they're interested in, is in either testing their blood levels or injecting. So the cost of getting a child all set up for that through the hospital system, ready to go, and then they're thrown out into the world, and then the first thing they do is say, I'm going to watch that TV program. Oops, they've forgotten what they're supposed to be doing. They're not adhering, and the Americans call it adherence, and we call it compliance. So what we do is we look at the pharmaceutical companies and say, what data do you need? That's one example. It could be the NHS. It could be a patient advocacy group. What is it that you need about those people? What's the data? What's the behavior that you need to make sure that they adhere, or to make sure you can engage with them more and more as they are progressing through their illness? And so we do that using games, gamification, etc. So let's just move on. Okay, harnessing the power of play. We've all seen this. We're playing hide and seek here, I remember. So it's a voluntary attempt. The thing about games is there's obstacles, and I'm sure there's probably a lot of gamers in here, and there's obstacles that you'll go and you'll spend hours overcoming voluntarily. It's a weird and a strange thing that people, Farmville, all sorts of things, people getting up early to go and harvest virtual crops before they go to work. Fine. It's great, but you're doing it voluntarily. So there's goals. Okay, let's go through these. So, you know, I hope I'm going to get safe without being tagged. It's an American phrase, I suppose. What would we call it? Tigged? Anyway. There's rules. So he's got to count before he can start looking round. There's feedback systems, and there's, as I say, voluntary participation. So, okay, we're talking about games in healthcare. Children with type 1 diabetes, and then the aged population, because one of the things that we needed to focus on was opportunities. So we're already taking, we've already produced games for type 1 diabetes that are very successful. And we're moving into the UK to try and reuse that game technology for children who suffer type 1 diabetes over here. But the opportunity, which is what you wanted to look at as well, I think the very big opportunity, certainly in Europe, is the aged population, and we'll come to that in a minute. So here's Monster Manor. So you imagine a child who's got type 1 diabetes. As I say, the last thing they want to do is go and inject or go and test their blood levels or whatever they need to do. So we use the power of gamification and the psychological background to that, which is all about motivation. It's all about, in terms of games, things like progressive mastery. So you want to do a little bit more, to find out a little bit more, whether it's on a PC, whether it's on an iPhone or whatever. And the idea here is that it's Monster Manor, and I'll give you a bit of a description in a minute. The idea is that it motivates children to stay on top of their testing and logging. What you're looking for with a diabetic child and diabetic of any age is a stable blood level. And the thing about games is that you've got the ability to fail without looking really stupid because it's inside a game, but you've also got the opportunity to progress into different levels. So there's a lot of motivation, a lot of psychology going on to help motivate you. So the idea of Monster Manor is that you've got to effectively build a monster, and then you've got to look after that monster, and you can do that by making good choices, good choices about food that you could be eating or feeding to the monster, good choices about lifestyle as a child. It's a poor example. But basically what you're looking for is this consistency through the game to be able to keep on adhering to their medicine or their treatment. And it's very, very effective at doing that. I'd love to go into more detail, but we haven't got the time tonight. So let's keep going. Here's another one for games. This sign here I could never get used to, but basically this is the one there is, it's I love jellyfish. And the idea here is that you've got the best way is that if you look on the right-hand side, we're using some hardware from Avery Dennison. So they've got motion sensors and they've got all sorts of clever stuff. And for children who might be suffering diabetes or might be suffering the early signs of obesity and things like that, we need to be able to, again, motivate them to be as healthy as possible. So the idea here is that as much exercise is done to try and get the figure that over there, the jellyfish, to glow as much as possible. So if you're not moving very much, it's not glowing very much. And there's all sorts of really clever stuff that tonight isn't the time to go through that, but we're here for a different agenda. But still, that's the sort of attitude, and that's our approach to games for children. Now, bear in mind that we're talking about personalisation, and we're talking about opportunity and innovation. As I say, from my point of view, the example that I'd like to choose in terms of personalisation is in the ageing population. So what about that? You've probably all seen these figures. It's not a good graph, that, but it gives the red and the blue lines are particularly frightening because it's not that far away and it's a huge, huge explosion. I was sat round a table, we were discussing a couple of weeks ago early onset Alzheimer's. It's probably going to be hard for you guys to believe, but I'm nearly 50. And what was frightening was that we were discussing early onset Alzheimer's as though it was something in the future for the people sat around the table. And then we came to the stark conclusion, in fact, that we were all of the age where it's something we should be concerned about. So it's easy to put a graph up like that and say, yeah, that's going to happen in the future. And it's easy to say, yeah, but people haven't got iPads. People don't understand a computer in the aged population. It's irrelevant because, yes, I do apologise if you take offence. The point I'm making is, yes, people do, but secondly, people who are my age now are going to be in that population. So we will have iPads or whatever the next touch glasses, whatever it's going to be. Okay. These were taken from a colleague of mine, David Sinclair, and he's a very, very strong policy advisor for the aged policy within government anyway. And he suggested things like this, TripAdvisor for care homes. Now, I'm just talking now about the personalisation agenda, because people are going to be saying, you know, it's a bit like the witch guide for care homes. It's going to be that way at some point. People are going to be saying, I want this, 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 a combination of that, and a bit of that, and I want to make the decision about that. So there's going to be, I think, a lot of that going on, and here, this is, you know, opportunities here, and supermarket-type shopping for home care. It's going to happen. It will happen. There'll be, you know, 5 stars for this home, 5 stars for that home, and of course, the private sector's already there in a big way. And the last one there, apps and games to facilitate active aging. That's where I come in a little bit. So what we're looking at, what are we doing? So we envisage in the very near future, so we're doing this now to be out in the next year or so. We're looking at inclusive social games. I'm not keen on the words inclusive or exclusive, but basically what we're saying is that the people who are in a family unit can be brought together, whether they're carers, relatives, or whatever, in games for the reasons that we've talked about earlier on: motivation, engagement, etc. And we're looking at how the games can encourage compliance with treatment, as we've said before, where games can help learn or relearn. And there's a lot of good support around where games can help to relieve boredom. And in care homes, one, as some of you may know, one of the big issues is, of course, around there's a lot of time. And games are a good way of filling that time. You can combine it with just pleasure, but if you can combine it with learning, with challenges, with goals, with health, of course, key one, then all the better. So what we do is we collect the data and we refine the data. I've got a / after refine, I do apologise. Don't know how that got in there. And our business model is such that if you're a child and you're playing Monster Manor, if you're an adult and you're playing one of the games that we're producing for elderly people, data's created all the time. Every time you interact with the game or the social network, there's data that's produced. And as I said earlier on, pharmaceutical companies love to be able to say, what we can't do is understand the behavior of 15 to 19-year-olds leaving home with type 1 diabetes, and we can't market to them. How do we get to them? Well, we can use a game or a social network, and as long as we anonymize or get permission to use that data, then it's a very powerful way of allowing trend information to come along, so people can start seeing, well, what actually happens when children go to college, or teenagers go to college, for example, is they forget completely, or the fact that mum isn't there or dad isn't there saying, don't forget, don't have too much sugar, don't blah, 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 blah. So we collect that data, and our business model basically is selling back to, selling back to the pharmaceutical company that very, very key target data, and it's very valuable to them. I've just put that little phrase there, and again, that's about all sorts of things, innovation, but don't forget that, as I say, technology is already here. The technology that we're talking about is probably old now, iPads and phones and television, so there's no point thinking about the technology. It's there, and people are going to be using it. And then we're talking about what specific sectors in healthcare we were asked to look at. Well, for us, this is where we are specifically looking at. So the patient gets apps that make a difference in their lives, which we've talked about. We work predominantly, our business model is to work with non-profit organisations as our channel to the market. So we don't necessarily sell apps to people who need them. They're usually distributed, for want of a better phrase, through the non-profit organisations like Alzheimer's UK or Diabetes UK, etc. Industry gets a channel that can communicate with their customers. One of the other things we do is we allow games to be carefully and ethically branded, especially in the US, so that there is sort of subtle messages coming and support and promotion from the industry. But of course, we've got to be careful of the regulatory aspect of that as well. And as I say, we get paid to deliver. We keep deliver the services, we keep the ownership of the technology, and we can span applications across a variety of disease areas. So, that's me. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil.